Marco, I want to start with you because that tax law was finally signed into, or that tax bill was signed into law on Monday. It has new tax reporting requirements for crypto entities, including crypto brokers, and that's really broadly defined. Basically, any firm that regularly provides services carrying out transfers of digital assets. To me, that sounds a lot like an exchange. So I'm curious how that affects Kraken.
Actually doesn't affect Kraken much at all, and I think that was part of the controversy around the bill when it was first being debated. Kraken is already, I should say, Kraken and other exchanges like us are already preparing for a world where we are obligated to do reporting. There was already a rulemaking in progress that would have obligated us to do reporting. The rulemaking faced no meaningful objection from the industry. It seemed sensible. And we were ready to do our fair share. So the controversy that you're seeing around the bill was around how expansive that definition of broker really was. It didn't just capture us. It captured you. It captured me. It captured the individual, the average Joes and Janes on the street who want to use crypto. It would have, I should say, it will obligate most of us to do individual reporting on information that we don't have, on information that we have no real business having about our counterparties. It's a surveillance measure, plain and simple. And in fact, taken to its literal meaning, it would be unconstitutional. So what we're seeing now is a reaction to that. It was attached to a must-pass bill at the 11th hour, which is part of why it made it through and part of why we saw so much disruptive debate on the matter. But now that the dust has settled, now that people are a little bit more clear-eyed about it, we see a pair of bills in the Senate, both looking to signal the Senate's objection to the way that things were done, to signal the Senate's objection to the final language of the law. But frankly, more important than just those signaling bills is a bipartisan effort now underway in the House to amend those provisions in the final bill. So hopefully we'll see
Marco,
some change.
That's what I wanted to follow up with you on. If you could literally write that bill, if you could write that legislation, what would it look like?
I would say obligate us, obligate Kraken, obligate the Krakens of the world, all of the other exchanges out there in the country, obligate us to do the same thing that, Schwab does or other brokers, traditional brokers do. Don't try to expand the definition of brokers to capture individuals. I mean, people have no business spying on each other. What it does is create a two-tiered system. It creates a system that is unfortunately more restrictive and more intrusive for average folks on the street than it does for exchanges. We should have a bill that just obligates the businesses and doesn't obligate the developers, doesn't obligate the individual users, doesn't obligate the miners. That's the right outcome.
And Justina, I want to go to you because let's talk about the actual price of Bitcoin, which has been very volatile. Walked through it in the intro, up a little bit today, up about 1%. But there was a really interesting Bloomberg News article this week, is that if you look at the correlation between the price of Bitcoin and the NASDAQ 100, mostly tech stocks in that index, that correlation has actually broken down. You aren't seeing those two asset classes move in tandem anymore. And if that's the case, I'm curious, where is Bitcoin taking its cues from now?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point because another trend that a lot of people have spotted is U.S. trading is driving Bitcoin prices more, maybe because a lot of activity has shifted out of China. And I think what we're seeing in Bitcoin right now is sort of kind of its own leverage cycle. We're seeing this pattern a lot, which is, when Bitcoin was at its record high again, we saw another record in the open interest of Bitcoin futures and pretty hefty premium paid on those futures. And so it seems like what's happening right now is the sentiment is fading a little bit, and so the market is sort of still in this consolidation phase.
Well, I'm wondering, Justina, how much this has to do with hitting a record high of over $68,000 per coin and then seeing a slide over the last 5 days that amounted to roughly 16%. Are people seeing this as an opportunity to buy the dip? Indeed, it was trending a few days ago when Bitcoin was sliding in the early part of this most recent sell-off.
Right. I mean, I think people have kind of learned from the past year's patterns that kind of buying the dip has at least worked in crypto kind of recently.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of interesting because whenever Bitcoin falls, you have a lot of fans saying this is actually healthy because it's leverage flushing out of the system. And I think we're kind of going through that process right now. And of course, usually something happened, a headline comes out, and kind of we see that leverage building up again.
And Justina, what about Ether? Because it seems like, Bitcoin and Ether, they move in tandem, but that Ether tends to move a lot more than Bitcoin. Is that still the case?
Right. I mean, I think that Ether has kind of, had its own narrative in recent months because it's been linked to a lot of, even more, I guess, widely reported developments, such as like non-fungible tokens. So I think people are kind of like seeing Bitcoin as a more of a digital gold narrative, Ben, but kind of Ethereum as something that's kind of been linked to all these applications that are like beloved by crypto speculators right now.
And Marco, I want to throw the last question to you because one of the really interesting developments to watch over the past few months is crypto firms broadly just ramp up their lobbying efforts. And I'm curious if Kraken is, on your end, starting to, increase your donations or your own lobbying efforts.
Your timing is impeccable. We have just actually engaged in two major efforts and two major pushes in DC. We've always been engaged in DC policy, but you're absolutely right. 2022 is going to be the year that crypto comes out in Washington. Our two efforts recently has been to massively increase our contribution to the Blockchain Association, where Kraken does sit on the board, which is an important industry advocacy group for not only the companies in the industry, but for the users. And also, Kraken is hiring its very first global head of policy. And I think we should all look forward to announcements on that point in the future.
What kind of timeline are we looking at there for your global policy head announcement?
You'll probably see something just after the holidays.